What is up, everybody? My name is John, and I am the host of Martian MMA, and we are back for episode 51. This week, we are going to be analyzing and predicting the UFC 235 pay-per-view going down this Saturday night from Las Vegas, Nevada. As you notice, we switched up the introduction to the podcast. After 50 episodes, I decided it was time to switch things up in the introduction side of things. And, I've been listening to a lot of Half the Battle lately, and I like the way that Daniel and Shaq just introduce themselves and, get right into it. So I decided to steal a page out of their book, ditch the intro music, the Joe Rogan stuff, and just get right into it. So we're going to be doing that from now on in the program, and we're going to get right into analyzing and predicting the pay-per-view coming up this weekend. At the end of the podcast, we will recap the last UFC card. As always, the UFC on ESPN Plus that went down in Prague last weekend, headlined by Jan Blachowicz versus Thiago Santos. But we are going to be discussing the 12 fights on this week's pay-per-view, starting things off first. And we are going to be in the strawweight division. We have Poliana Viana, who is 10-2, taking on Hannah Cifers, who is 8-3. The opening betting line for this one was Poliana Viana at the favorite at -350 to Hannah Cifers at +250. Right now, we see Viana at -265, Cifers at +225 on our affiliated sportsbook 5dimes.eu. I agree with the line movement so far. There's been some pretty heavy action coming in on the Hannah Cifers this past week. I think at one point actually Viana stooped down to almost -400, which is crazy. I think Cifers got as high as +285. Now all the way down to +225. I really don't knock the action on this one at all. This is going to be a really competitive fight, and I really, can see Hannah Cifers winning this contest easily. Hannah Cifers is a smaller girl. She's, even at the smallest weight class in the UFC at strawweight, she still seems small for the weight class, especially in her last fight against Macy Barber, who is an absolute beast. I can't stress enough how much of a beast she ran into in her UFC debut. I think Barber is, already, one of the top fighters in 115-pound division. I think she'll make some real big noise throughout the 2019 fight year. So keep an eye on Macy Barber. But Hannah Cifers unfortunately ran into her in her UFC debut. She looked, decent in the first round. She was, hard to take down. She looked pretty intelligent in the clinch. Looked like she knew what she was doing. Maybe has some sort of Muay Thai background. Cifers' bread and butter is going to be her boxing. That's where she definitely has the most success. But like I said, she has pretty decent takedown defense. It took a lot for Barber to take her down. I think Barber might have slammed her down in the last 10 seconds of the round, but Barber actually struggled a little bit getting her down. And, her opponent, Poliana Viana, is, I guess you would call her a submission fighter. She wants to get the fight to the floor. She seems pretty strong in the clinch. She likes getting the fight there a lot of the times and then looking for her takedowns or her guard pulls to get the fight to the floor. But Poliana Viana's striking defense is not good, man. She eats punches clean. She has no head movement. She actually kind of moves her head into the punches sometimes. I don't think that's what you're supposed to do. So, it's going to be interesting, this one. Cifers is the +220 underdog. I have no problem laying a little bit of action on her. I think I got her all the way at +285, but there's still value on Cifers, man. I think that this fight should be maybe Viana -150 and Cifers +130 or something like that. You can look at Hannah Cifers' points handicap line, which is, if Hannah Cifers wins inside the distance or loses the decision by less than 4 points or wins the decision at all, she will, your bet will cash, so that basically means that if Poliana Viana 30-27s her 3 times, then you will lose because that's 9 points. But if Poliana Viana wins 29-28, that's 3 points. That means the bet covers and you still win. So if that's going to be a huge, bet for me in this one. I can't believe I'm laying this chalk on Hannah Cifers because this is a little bit of a lower level women's MMA fight, but I just think that there's massive value right now on Cifers. So the pick is going to be Cifers to get this one done. Honestly, I could see her TKOing Viana or getting it done by decision. The next fight was supposed to be Frankie Saenz versus Marlon Vera. However, it was canceled a few days ago with Marlon Vera injury. So we are moving on to the women's bantamweight division. We have Gina Manze, who is 5-2, taking on Macy Chiasson, who is 3-0. The betting line for this one opened up Chiasson as the -300 favorite. Gina Manze at +220, looking over at our affiliated sportsbook, 5dimes.eu. We see Chiasson at -500 to Manze at +400. So a lot of action coming in on Macy Chiasson. I don't really blame the bettors for jumping on this line. This one seems to be going to be a pretty tough matchup for Manze. We've seen, Chiasson just come off her winning the Ultimate Fighter at featherweight. She beat Pansy Kinsey in that fight and looked really impressive in that fight. She, was relentless with the takedown. She has good ground and pound. She's got some power on the feet too. She's just a really strong girl, and her submissions and her top control is very good. Once she gets her opponents down, it's very hard for them to get up. She had a lot of success on the Ultimate Fighter. She choked out a few girls on that show, and then she went on the Ultimate Fighter or the finale, and then got another rear naked choke. So despite her being 3-0, she actually has a good amount of amateur experience too, 4-2 amateur record, and then those 2 exhibition bouts too. So she's actually got 9 wins under her MMA career and 2 losses. So she's the much more experienced opponent. Gina Manze is 5-2, no amateur record for her, and she's just struggled in the UFC so far. She actually had a nice decision win over Wu Yanan, who actually just submitted Lauren Mueller herself, so that win looks pretty good. But she got dominated by Sarah McMahon, just taken down and submitted right away by a really strong wrestler and grappler in Sarah McMahon, and then also lost the fight to Lena Landsberg in a really boring clinch fest where Manze was just not able to separate and get distance and wing her wild punches. So she does have power, Manze. She has, she wings, strikes, punches being her best, weapon, I'd say. She can hit a takedown. She's got a little bit of awareness on the ground. That's where she won that fight against Wu Yanan. She was taking her down and landed some ground and pound in that fight. But, since then we have not really seen Manze show too much skill in the UFC. And I just think this fight really favors Chiasson. I think that Chiasson will take her down fairly easily, and then just be heavy on top, land that ground and pound, and then probably Manze will give up her back at some point, and Chiasson will get the sub. So the pick is going to be by Chiasson by sub. And last time I checked the prop on Chiasson by submission, +170. Man, that is a great line. If you think that Chiasson could pound her out with some ground and pound, which is also a huge possibility, the -149 inside the distance line isn't too bad either. But man, I would be pretty shocked to see Manze catch Chiasson. I guess the only chance she really has is maybe winging a wild shot on the feet in the first couple stand-up exchanges and catching Chiasson's chin. But I really don't think that will happen, and I think Chiasson will win this fight fairly easily. Moving on to the next fight in the middleweight division, we have Charles Byrd, who is 10-5, taking on Edmund Shabazian, who is 8-0. The opening betting line for this one was Shabazian as the -145 favorite, Charles Byrd at +105. Looking over at our affiliated sportsbook, 5dimes right now, we see Shabazian -145. Byrd at +120. So a lot of two-way action coming in on this fight. This is a very close matchup when the odds reflect it. Charles Byrd, he's had a pretty up and down career in the UFC so far. He came in off the Dana White Tuesday Night Contender Series, a really impressive win over Randall Wallace in that fight, and then he came in, took down John Phillips, had some heavy top pressure, and eventually got the choke in round 1 to that fight. But then he fought a brawler, a powerful striker in Darren Stewart, a common opponent between the two of these fighters. Byrd had some early success versus Stewart. He won the first round of that fight, but then, he got a little complacent in round 2. I think he probably was honestly winning round 2 as well, but then Darren Stewart hit him with a short elbow, and it just changed the whole direction of the fight. Byrd was hurt, and then Stewart swarmed on him and ended up finishing that fight. So, 1-1 record for Byrd so far in the UFC. 2 wins on the Tuesday Night Contender Series. This is going to be really interesting because I think Byrd has a pretty solid ground game, but Shabazian, another Dana White Tuesday Night Contender Series guy, he was on that show last year, knocked out Antonio Jones in 40 seconds. We all thought he was, a powerful striker. Almost all of his wins have come by, TKO, head kick. They all have, actually. So we were really expecting him to just swing and bang with Darren Stewart and have a really exciting fight, but that didn't happen at all. Shabazian went out there and wrestled the whole fight. He looked pretty sloppy doing it. He didn't look too technical doing it, but it's honestly it was a good sign. Despite him looking a little sloppy in there, it was a good sign to see that he could recognize an opponent's strength, which is Stewart's striking, and then use anything possible to avoid that. His first fight in the UFC, he wants to get his feet wet before he goes out there and just throws down with Darren Stewart, a proven guy in the UFC who's been in brawls, who's been tested, had his chin tested, and came back and won fights. So Shabazian was like, fuck that noise, I'm just going to take him down because he doesn't have any wrestling, any ground game, and he won the fight that way. It was close, and like I said, it wasn't pretty, but he got the W in his debut. I have a feeling he will be more comfortable in this fight. He will look to unleash his hands a little more and get his striking going. But, Bird's no slouch on the feet. I think that these two are, their ground games will cancel out. Bird actually might even have the better ground game. And then, it's really going to be, it's going to be the first time we're seeing Shabazian's strike, go punch for punch with the guy in the UFC. He might have had some stand-up exchanges with Stewart in that fight, but, man, that was really like a clinch fest and a takedown fight. So this one's going to be tough to call, but I think the Bird has more tools. I think, like I said, he has a slightly better ground game. I think it's going to be pretty evenly matched on the feet. Both of these guys have pretty bad cardio. I think Bird actually has the worst cardio between the two. We saw Shabazian go the distance in his last fight. Looked pretty gassed doing it, but Bird, gassed out maybe in the second round versus Stewart, and that's what led to the knockout. So I think I trust Shabazian's cardio a little more. And if this one goes to the scorecards, I think Shabazian has a better chance of edging it out. But if it's a finish in this one, I think it'll be Bird getting it, possibly a submission, maybe even a knockout. So the pick, I guess I'll side with Bird, but it's not a confident one. It would probably be a dog or pass at these odds, and it's going to be a good fight. Next fight in the welterweight division, we have Mickey Gall, who is 5-1, taking on Diego Sanchez, who is 28-11. The opening betting line for this one was Mickey Gall at -210 to Diego Sanchez at +160. Looking over at $5 right now, we see Diego Sanchez +200, Mickey Gall at -240. So initially, a ton of action came in on Mickey Gall. His line got all the way as low as -350, earlier this week. And then there's just been a steady amount of action coming in on Diego Sanchez because, people realize that, Mickey Gall, is very overhyped. He has had a couple nice wins in the UFC. But, look at the level of competition he's fought. He fought old man George Sullivan in his last fight. He lost to Randy Brown in that fight where he was actually out-grappled by Randy Brown. His best win being over Sage Northcutt by far, getting the choke in that fight after he rocked Northcutt with a punch. He definitely showed his best stand-up skills and his best grappling skills in that fight. But you look before that, and he choked out CM Punk, and he choked out Mike Jackson in both of their pro fights. Ron Templeton, all those guys were in their first fight. So I think that Mickey Gall is very overrated. The fact that he was -350 versus Diego Sanchez is crazy. I think we're all going to look back at that no matter who wins or loses this weekend and think that was crazy. Diego Sanchez has never been submitted in his career. The dude's got, 39 fights. He's been in the UFC for 15 years, some shit like that. Has fought the who's who of killers, generations of top-level lightweights, welterweights, and Diego Sanchez has hung in there with, most of them. Only getting finished by a few. We've seen him get knocked out by, Lozon, Iaquinta, Matt Brown recently, but before that, his only stoppage loss was to BJ Penn by, that was a stoppage because of the doctor. He had a huge cut in that fight, but that's the only other time he's been knocked out, so he's definitely tough to finish. He only really loses to technical strikers, and Diego Sanchez's last fight was really impressive. He's facing Craig White, a big, tall, long guy who is, really known for his submissions. definitely his submission threat is his biggest talent is Craig White, but Diego Sanchez was taking him down, was, stacking him up against the fence, landing ground and pound, and, he's getting up kicked a little bit while doing it, but he didn't seem to mind at all. He was, keeping that top pressure heavy, and he remained on top for almost the whole fight, winning that fight via unanimous decision. So, if Mickey Gall can certainly still tap him out. I'm not saying that's impossible for it to happen, but he would have to have a really slick back take. He would have to maybe hurt Diego with a punch first, which I think is going to be difficult to do because Mickey Gall's striking is not very good. And, I think that this has a good chance at looking a lot like the Craig White fight. If Gall's looking desperate for his takedowns, I don't think he has very good takedowns. He likes pulling guard. Anytime you swarm him on the feet, man, he has terrible defense. He pulls guard when he gets, if a person's throwing a 4 or 5 punch combo, he'll duck under, pull guard, and just hope he can, get some, a little bit of comfort that way, negate that striking. But, Gall is super uncomfortable on the feet. So if Sanchez is able to mix up the striking in this fight, I think it's going to be even more in Sanchez's favor. If it's straight grappling, I still really like Sanchez's chances. The dude's been, I'm sure he's a black belt by now. He's been, wrestling, grappling with, like I said, the best guys. Kenny Florian, BJ Penn, Sean Shirk. He's been fighting these guys for 10, 15 years. So Mickey Gall is nothing to him. I think Diego Sanchez is definitely the most well-rounded, most accomplished fighter that Mickey Gall has ever fought. And I don't think Mickey Gall is in the top 20 fighters that Diego Sanchez has ever fought. So the fact that Sanchez was almost 3-1 at some points, it was insane. I definitely hopped in on some action on my boy Diego Sanchez at plus 285. Right now his points handicap line, again, that points handicap line I was talking about earlier, plus 3.5 is plus 115 for Diego Sanchez. That means if he goes to the scorecards and it's a competitive decision, 29-28 for Gall, or he wins the decision, or he submits Gall or something like that, then your bet cashes. The only chance that you lose his bet is if Gall isn't able to take his back and submit him. So you could bet this. You could bet Sanchez by points handicap, and then go ahead and bet Gall by submission at plus 244, and that's guaranteed profit right there. So I think there's a few spots like that in this card, and I'll continue to elaborate on the points handicap as we go. But the pick is going to be the big upset in Diego Nightmare Sanchez, and he is going to shock the world and win a decision over the younger Mickey Gall in this one. So the pick Sanchez to get it done by decision. Moving on to the next fight in the bantamweight division, we have Alejandro Perez, who is 21-6-1, taking on Cody Stamann, who is 17-2. Looking at the opening betting line for this one, Cody Stamann opened minus 155, Alejandro Perez plus 115. Looking over at our affiliate at sportsbook5dimes.eu, a lot of action coming in on Cody Stamann, pushing him to minus 200, Alejandro Perez up to plus 170. So there's definitely two-way action coming in on this fight, but it's definitely more one-sided towards Cody Stamann. I definitely believe that Cody Stamann should be the favorite in this fight, but I don't think I lay the chalk at minus 200 where it is right now. There's just, it's too much unknown about Cody Stamann. He's I wouldn't say unknown. I mean, we've seen a lot of him in the octagon so far. He's had almost an hour of fight time, so we definitely have like a pretty accurate assumption of where his skills are at currently. And his takedowns are great, man. He blasts takedowns. He's got really powerful wrestling, but he's a little reckless a little bit too. We saw that in the fight against Aljamain Sterling, his last fight. He got caught with a knee bar in that fight. He was really just out-grappled by a more of a jiu-jitsu guy in Aljamain Sterling. Now, Sterling has great wrestling and great striking as well. As we learned in a couple weeks ago, he's really one of the top 5 bantamweights in the world right now, and Stamann ran into him in his last fight. But Stamann is he likes spamming shots. He likes throwing a couple punches and then blasting for a takedown. And I think that Perez is a little bit weak like that. I think that sometimes he can get caught he can get taken down after, you know, someone disguises it with a few punches. We saw that in the Matthew Lopez fight. Lopez would throw a few, you know, powerful hooks, and right when Perez starts thinking about the striking, Matthew Lopez changes levels and gets the takedown. Lopez actually got a few takedowns in that fight, and I really don't rate Matthew Lopez too highly. I mean, he has decent takedowns, but as a fighter, he is, you know, pretty low level. But Perez, I believe, will have the advantage in the striking in this fight. I think he's the more comfortable striker in this one. But I don't think either guy has very good defense. You know, they could, you know, get into a brawl on the feet, and, you know, either one of them could get caught with a punch and, you know, possibly go down in this one. But I don't see it happen. I see this one going by decision. Perez, you know, he has good sub defense. You know, he'll get taken down and, you know, try to blast back up to his feet. He'll explode with some power. Sometimes he'll get his back taken, but he doesn't really care too much because he's got good sub defense. We saw that in the Matthew Lopez fight. He defended a back attack from him. So, and he's also good at using the cage. So if Stamann wants to take Perez down, I would recommend him doing it in the center of the octagon where Perez doesn't have that cage to help him get up. You know, he's actually pretty good at cage walking after he gets taken down. So I think Stamann will be able to hit the takedowns, but even when he does hit the takedowns, he still has a way of getting in a close fight. We saw that against Dukinsoy and against Caraway, both split decision fights where he was, you know, successful with the takedown in that fight, but, you know, his opponents were, you know, able to get up. You know, Stamann's top control is not good. He will get you down to the ground, but sometimes he really doesn't do the most with it. He's got decent ground and pound, I guess, but, you know, in terms of holding position, he's not very good at that. So Perez could get back up to his feet and make the stand-up exchanges interesting and make this a closer fight on the scorecards. But I think ultimately Stamann will edge out a close split decision. So, you know, like I said, Stamann should be the favorite, maybe minus 150. You know, so where the odds are now, I guess there's value on Perez, but I think he will lose this fight. So just be back with caution in that one. Next fight in the light heavyweight division, we have Misha Cirkunov, who is 14-4, taking on Johnny Walker, who is 16-3. The opening betting line for this one was Johnny Walker at minus 215 to Misha Cirkunov at plus 165. Looking over at 5 dimes right now, we see Walker at minus 150, Cirkunov at plus 130. So most of the action on this fight coming in Misha Cirkunov's way, and I agree with it. You know, Johnny Walker has made a lot of noise the past couple months, you know, making his UFC debut, knocking out Khalil Roundtree, and then, you know, getting that really impressive first round finish over Justin Ledet only a few weeks ago, February 2nd. So quick turnaround, 1 month turnaround, but he literally took no damage in that fight. And, you know, he might have had to ice his hands a little bit after the fight, but it seemed like, I mean, he barely was in a fight that night. He literally just went in that cage, did a couple spins, and knocked Justin Ledet out like it was nothing. So the dude has crazy striking, man. He's a hell of a character. He's, you know, dancing on his way to the octagon. I like his steez. I like the way he, you know, carries himself. He's a very funny guy, but, you know, it's hard to get a good sense of, you know, where his skills are at. You know, the dude is fought 6 times in 6 times in 2018. The dude's a madman, fighting like 1 week after he fought. You know, he had a tough fight against some guy named Makiovic, some Polish gentleman. I watched that fight on March 11th, 2018. He was taken down in that fight. You know, his opponent eventually gassed out, and then Johnny Walker finished him. He fought 6 days later after having an 8-minute professional fight with that Makiovic gentleman, and then went on to defeat a guy named Cheek Cone 6 days later. So, you know, he's just you know, seems like he's obsessed with MMA. He believes in himself, and you know, that's scary sometimes. You know, so getting over to the other side of this fight, Misha Cirkunov, you know, is a guy who's, you know, been a little inconsistent in the UFC. He made his you know, he picked up a few went on a win streak of Daniel Jolly, Alex Nicholson, Ion Kutaleba, and Nikita Krylov. Some really nice wins and submissions, and that all 4 finishes in his first 4 UFC fights. Then he got knocked out by Volkan Ozdemir by, you know, a short punch to the back of the head. He got taken down and ground and pound TKO'd by Glover Teixeira, which was, you know, questionable losses. But, you know, he seems to sometimes he just isn't fully awake in the fight. Maybe, I don't know. Like he started both of those fights and just wasn't ready, I guess. And Ozdemir hit him with some shots and put him away. Glover, took him down, pounded him out. But he did bounce back with a nice win over Patrick Cummins, was able to take down a really good grappler and wrestler in Patrick Cummins, and then get the tap on him via arm triangle. So, I really like Misha Cirkunov's chances in this fight. I think that he should not really mess around with the feet too much with Walker, even though Cirkunov is pretty skilled on the feet. He's got good kicks. He's got some good, some good boxing. He's just very chinny on the feet. He gets hit. His defense is not that great, and Walker can hit him with some unorthodox shit. But Cirkunov could hit Walker too. Walker does not play much into defense. He's really just thinking offense at all times. Throwing his spinning attacks and his high kicks and his elbows. He's got a really diverse, striking attack. But this fight is really gonna, the area I'm looking at it the most is the ground for Cirkunov. I think Cirkunov's going to look for takedowns. He's going to look to be heavy on Walker, and he's going to look for that submission. And if that fight with the Polish gentleman Makiewicz, if you watched that fight, you saw that Walker was taken down fairly easily. He does not have much takedown defense, and he's not very good at getting off of his back. Doesn't have much jiu-jitsu skill. So I think that Cirkunov will have a massive advantage on the ground. And honestly, on the feet, it's going to be pretty close too, because don't be fooled by Walker's flashy knockouts that he's not technical at all. He does not have good defense at all. So Cirkunov is a little more traditional, a little more defense oriented. He could certainly catch Walker on the feet. So I wouldn't be totally shocked if Cirkunov comes out here and is not not there in the first round like he was against Ozdemir, or like he was against Glover, and fights reckless and gets TKO'd or knocked out cold by Walker. That wouldn't be the most surprising thing ever. But I think Cirkunov comes in this fight, he fights smart, he gets the takedown, and he gets the submission over Johnny Walker. So this pick is going to be Cirkunov via submission. Next fight in the featherweight division, we have Zabit Magomedsharipov, who is 16-1, taking on Jeremy Stephens, who is 28-15. The opening betting line for this one is Zabit at -300, Jeremy Stephens at +220. Looking over at our affiliated sportsbook, 5dimes.eu, we see Zabit at -245, Jeremy Stephens +205. So actually, the more action coming in on this fight on Jeremy Stephens, pretty surprising. Zabit Magomedsharipov is just, an elite level talent in the UFC at this point so far. And even though he's only had, I think, 4 fights, he has just shown some of the most diverse arsenal of skills that we have ever seen in the octagon. Now, who knows how well his career will, play out, whether he will continue to adapt, continue to beat the top guys, continue that path to the championship. I'm not sure about that. I mean, I like his chances at it, but, I'm not guaranteeing he will get to a title shot. But as far as this guy's skill set, man, he is just incredible, man. Some of the... I could go on and on about the things that he does right. His best thing he does right, I think, is his distance control. The way he does this, like he's a high-level kickboxer. The only time you see guys who, are as comfortable with him on the feet and have good head movement on the feet are guys like Israel Adesanya, guys who fought professional kickboxing, professional Muay Thai, fought in Glory Kickboxing. It's just a level of skill that you only can really get if you have pro kickboxing experience. But somehow Zabit is able to do it. It definitely has to play with his Sambo experience. He's been martial artist since a young boy. He's been competing in Sambo. I'm sure he's done kickboxing. I'm sure he's done all types of competitions throughout his career, and it just has a plethora of experience to go along with his skills. But his head movement, man. You saw in the Kyle Bochniak fight, he just moves out of the way of punches, unlike very few people in the UFC do. The UFC is the highest level of MMA organization in the world, and I'd say head movement is one of the most rare skills that we see in the octagon. It's just, it's just something that MMA fighters are not really too concerned about. They're more concerned with offense or different ways to avoid punches, usually just eating punches clean instead of avoiding them at all. The tall men's defense we see a lot in MMA. Zabit, is a tall guy. He does, sort of lean back with the tall man's defense, but there's just very little chance he gets caught with those punches. He's been, swung at so many times over his career and has evaded those punches by centimeters so many times that he's just so comfortable in that octagon to the point where he can use the tall man's defense and be very safe. We saw that against the Kyle Bochniak fight. Bochniak was swinging bombs against him against the cage, and you're thinking, oh man, Rogan was going, Bochniak's tagging him, he's hurting Zabit. You watch that fight in slow motion, and Zabit is avoiding almost every punch or rolling with every punch. Rogan's commentary in that fight was pretty exaggerated. So Zabit's kicks are incredible. His trips, he's got great takedown trips. He doesn't really need to wrestle too much. He doesn't need to dive for your legs or go for single legs. He can just trip you with his legs like those Muay Thai dumps, or it's still wrestling, an outside trip, but he does it effortlessly, man. He's got good boxing. He hits hard. He's got good uppercuts, good jabs. And he can take you down, and once he gets you on the ground, man, his submission arsenal is vast. We've seen him get anacondas. We've seen him hit the pull-up stretch knee bar in his last fight against Brandon Davis. I think he might have finished Mike Santiago. That was anaconda. Yeah, rear naked choke, anaconda, knee bar. He's got guillotines. He's got rear nakeds. He's just like I said, a huge arsenal on the ground. And I've been talking about Zabit alone for 3 minutes, and he deserves it because, like I said, just a special talent. I've been fortunate enough to see him fight in person. I was at that fight versus Kyle Bochniak, and man, let me just tell you, it was probably the best combat sports fight I've ever seen. It was just the heart of Bochniak was on full display. The technique of Zabit was on full display. Even though I was sitting 300 feet away, I could admire his takedowns, admire his head movement, admire his kicks, his trips, everything. And just rewatching that fight a few days ago, it still blows my mind some of the techniques that Magomed Sharipov was able to pull off during that fight. You had Joe Rogan going, "Oh, come on!" He was it's just shit that you see in the gym sometimes, and you see people do it in judo maybe, but you just don't see that in the UFC level. But Magomed Sharipov is implementing those high risk takedowns and techniques, and he's having success with them. So enough about Zabit. We'll talk about his opponent, Jeremy Stephens, who even though I've been sucking the dick of Zabit for the past 5 minutes, I love Jeremy Stephens too, man. One of my favorite fighters to ever fight in the UFC. This guy almost never has boring fights. He goes balls to the wall all the time. He had a great 2018, picking up 2 second-round knockouts over Doo Ho Choi and Josh Emmett, and then eventually, getting that suffering that loss to Jose Aldo via that wicked body shot and that ground and pound in the first round of that fight. And we had Stephens come out since then that said, that fight, that loss sent him into a state of depression. For pretty much the past couple months, he was super depressed, and even had some suicidal thoughts. But luckily, his coach and good friend Eric Del Fiero enlisted him in some counseling, and Stephens said he's feeling much better. And that just goes to show you that even if you have 2 knockouts in the UFC earlier that year, you were just coming off a win streak, you still have that job where you can get paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to fight in a cage, and you're one of the toughest and most violent sons of bitches that ever walked in the octagon. None of that shit matters, man. You can still fall into that state of depression. You can still go down that road of mental health, and that shit is no joke. So I'm thankful to have Jeremy Stephens still here with us. Thankful that he's still fighting this weekend, and I hope that he can pull off one of the best performances of his career. This fight is just so hard to pick because, like I said, I got a lot of love for Stephens, and the technique of Magomed Sharipov is just so admirable that it's tough to pick a guy to cheer for in this fight. But thinking about the matchups, if you can't tell, I believe this fight is my favorite fight on the card all weekend. Maybe my favorite fight of the year so far. So let's talk about the matchup and how this fight is going to play out. We're gonna, Stephens has got great powerful boxing. He's got a powerful leg kick too, man. He'll shut your leg down with that kick, and I think that he will be looking to spam that kick early in this fight because Magomed Sharipov, a guy who relies on distance, a guy who relies on his legs, his movement, his footwork a lot. He needs those legs behind him, and If he's got a dead calf from a leg kick from Jeremy Stephens, then it's going to be hard to do that. But I do favor Zabit in this fight for a few different reasons. Stephens has, had trouble with technical strikers who jab and leg kick a lot in their fights, which, Zabit does. He uses a lot of leg kicks along with body kicks, head kicks, spinning kicks, and he has a really great jab as well. So I think that Stephens is going to have a little bit of trouble with that. He's going to, if he gets stuck on the outside on that long striking range, that kicking range, then I think Zabit will pick Stephens apart all day long. But if Stephens is able to successfully close that distance and get in a boxing range, that's when this fight gets really interesting. Because, Bochniak did have some success with boxing in that fight. He definitely landed some punches in that fight, and he was just marching forward, eating shots, and he was content to eat shots to close that distance, which is exactly what you have to do against a technical long striker like Zabit. So Stephens is going to be looking to do that again. He's going to be looking to blitz in that pocket, look for those big bombs, and try to test that chin of Magomed Sharipov, but it's going to be tough to do because Sharapov's, his distance control, his head movement, his jab, everything is so good. It's going to be hard to pierce that guard of Zabit. But another where this fight is competitive is on the feet. It's certain. I would say 60-40 in the favor of Zabit, but where the fight has a more clear advantage is for Zabit on the ground. I think that he will be able to hit takedowns against Stephens. Almost, I wouldn't say at will, but I would say that Zabit will be able to get him down without much trouble. Because you just have no idea what's coming. Most guys, when you have the threat of going to the floor, you're thinking a double leg or a single leg. But Zabit can take you down in so many different ways with the trips, with catching kicks, or mixing it up with the traditional wrestling shot. So it's going to be tough for Stephens to keep this fight on the feet. And then once this fight gets on the floor, even though Stephens does have very good sub defense, we saw that in the Charles Oliveira fight. Oliveira was not able to submit Stephens after getting him on the ground. Zabit will probably win rounds against Stephens. He will, keep that top pressure. He's got wicked top pressure, and he could even snatch a sub in this fight. So, wherever this fight goes, I slightly favor Zabit, but I would, certainly not be. I would be a little bit shocked to see Stephens, somehow close that distance and test the chin of Sharipov, possibly getting a TKO. I would be, delightfully surprised to see Stephens do that. With the rough patch he's had in his life lately, it would be great to see him get a huge win like this. But the pick is going to be Zabit, and this fight is just going to be a fucking masterpiece. So definitely tune into this fight. Smart move that the UFC is putting it on I believe it's on the ESPN, the headliner of ESPN. So this fight will hopefully get millions of viewers and get to show off MMA to the world. So with that being said, we're going to move on to the main card of the pay-per-view, which starts off in the bantamweight division. We have Cody Garbrandt, who is 11-2, taking on Pedro Munoz, who is 17-3. Cody Garbrandt opened up as the -185 favorite to Pedro Munoz at +145. Right now at 5 dimes, we see Cody Garbrandt -135, Pedro Munoz at +115. Shocking where the line is at right now. Cody Garbrandt, former bantamweight champion, only a year ago was the champion, and now he's -135 against Pedro Munoz. Not saying Pedro Munoz isn't a great fighter, because he is. He's a very well-rounded fighter, but man, it's just those two TJ losses that Cody suffered. Who knows how much they will have an impact on his career. Obviously, we see it in the betting line already. If this fight happened a year and a half ago, Garbrandt could have been -300 or 400, but after Garbrandt suffered those 2 knockout losses, who knows where he's at. Knows where he's at mentally, physically. His chin could have suffered from those 2 knockouts, and he could have never really recovered. And your chin better be intact when you're fighting Pedro Munoz, because he is great boxing, great pressure, and is going to be testing that chin for sure. But honestly, I think this fight's going to be a firefight. I just don't see any way it can't be. They are both. Maybe Cody could be technical, fight behind a jab, fight like he did versus Dominic Cruz. But Garbrandt was able to get some takedowns in that fight against Dominic Cruz. I don't think he's going to be able to do that against Pedro Munoz. He might be able to take him down, but Pedro Munoz has one of the best guillotines in MMA. So I would not advise that Cody Garbrandt try to shoot on Munoz, because I do rate Munoz as the better grappler, even though Garbrandt has a really solid wrestling background. I just really wouldn't trust, sticking my neck out there for a takedown versus Munoz. So this fight, I think, will be contested on the feet, where it will be pretty evenly contested. It's I think Garbrandt should have the slight advantage, but it's just how much can you trust Cody Garbrandt after those 2 losses, fighting his arch nemesis? He drops him in the first round of their first fight, starts talking all this shit, getting cocky, saying you're not getting out of this round before the round starts. Then he ducks under a head kick in that first round and starts showboating again that, oh, man, you missed me with that head kick. A minute goes by, he gets dropped by the same head kick, and then finished a minute later by his arch nemesis via, he gets dropped by the boxing, and then eventually finished by TJ Dillashaw. That was a huge detriment to his confidence and his chin. He lost his undefeated record against his arch nemesis. He lost his belt. Good thing he gets a second chance to, get another crack at it, even though he totally didn't deserve the rematch. Hopefully he's made the right adjustments, corrected that boxing defense in the pocket. He's not going to get caught in that same exchange like he did versus TJ Dillashaw. And then he goes out and he gets caught in the exact same mistake as he did in the first fight. He didn't get caught with a head kick this time, but the same thing. He was exchanging with TJ in the pocket, and his defense suffered. Whenever he stands, his feet were standing still. He wasn't using any footwork. He was just trading in the pocket super emotionally, and then he get caught, and he was dropped and finished again in that fight via with a barrage of punches from Dillashaw. So, who knows where the head of Garbrandt is at, if he has tightened up that defense. Because, if he hadn't fixed the errors in his boxing defense after the first time he was knocked out, you'd hope that he'd fix it after the second time he was knocked out. But can you really be confident in it? No, you cannot, in my opinion. Where the price is at now, it's bettable. At minus 135 for the former champion, who, might have the more technical boxing, but I would stay away from it. I don't really think, I'd say it's favored or pass. I mean, Munoz, minus 1 or plus 115 isn't great value, I don't think. I think he will, Munoz will have to put on the best fight of his life in this fight to win it, but he's got a good jab. He rips the body with his boxing. He could easily drag Garbrandt into a brawl and then test that chin. But Munoz is hittable as well in the feet. You saw that in the fight against Rob Font. He's content to eat some punches sometimes a lot of punches. He was able to finish and choke out Rob Font later in that first round, but he definitely got tagged with a good amount of punches by Rob Font in that fight, who's not nearly the technical striker that Garbrandt is, even though he is a very skilled boxer of his own right. So it's going to be a really, really close fight in this one. I favor Garbrandt slightly because, I think that Munoz is just a little bit too hittable on the feet. I'd like to think that Garbrandt would have fixed up his boxing defense by now, and if he does it, man, they're gonna have to do some real hard thinking over at Team Alpha Male, what they want to do with Cody Garbrandt's career. That would be 3 losses in a row. If Garbrandt loses this fight, I honestly see it being by a finish. He either gets tapped out or knocked out or choked out. So that would be, a huge derailment to Garbrandt's career. So I honestly hope he can get the win in this one. I think he still has a lot of potential. I'm sure he could get back to the title at some point if he fixes the holes in his game. So the pick is going to be Garbrandt, but it's not a super confident one. But this is going to be a great fight to kick off the pay-per-view. Next fight in the women's strawweight division, we have Tecia Torres, who is 10-3. Taking on Weili Zhang, who is 18-1. The betting line for this one opened up Tecia Torres as the plus 125 underdog to Zhang at minus 165. Looking over at our affiliated sportsbook, 5dimes.eu, we see Tisha Torres plus 100 now. Willie Zhang at minus 120. So more action coming in on Torres' way. It's this one's a close fight. It's gonna be. I think it will be a close decision. So I really can't knock the people betting on Torres in this spot. But I slightly just favor Willie Zhang in this one. I think she's a little bit better everywhere. We've seen Torres in the octagon a lot more. She's definitely fought the better competition, but she's come up short in the biggest fights of her career, against Andrade, against Ian Jacek. Certainly there's no shame in these losses. Some of the best women in the world. Nami Yunus, Esparza, Marcos, all of those women, except for Jacek, are primarily grapplers. Nami Yunus has evolved her game over time, but she started as a jiu-jitsu girl. But but Tisha is she's well rounded too. This one that's why I said this fight is so close. She's got good boxing. She's strong in the clinch. She's a really muscular girl. I think she will be stronger than Zhang in this one. But Torres was taken down by Michelle Waterson in her fight a few times. She was, looked like she wanted to get up, looked like she had the desire to get off her back, but she just didn't quite have the technique to do it, honestly. And she, was kind of stuck on her back for a good amount of that fight. She was able to win round 1 and 3 of that fight versus Waterson. She can threaten with a sub from time to time off of to get off her back. She's not really looking to submit. She'll just get taken down and then throw up an armbar and then scramble back to her feet where she's more comfortable, which is a technique that comes in handy a lot in MMA. It could even in this fight. I think Zhang will look for takedowns in this one. She's got good trip takedowns. The outside trip in the clinch. She'll push you up against the cage and then just drop you with an outside or outside trip or inside trip. And once she gets on top, she's got heavy top pressure, man. She's, it's going to be hard for Torres to get off of her back if she gets on her back in this one. And Zhang's going to punish her if she gets her there. She's got good ground and pound. She likes using elbows. She, she's very heavy and she has good ground and pound. It does Zhang. And she also has the ability to snatch up a sub. A lot more. I think she's got something like. Of her 18 wins, I think 15 or 16 of them are by finish. A lot of submissions in there. She's very good on the feet as well. She's her boxing defense isn't great, but she's got good leg kicks. She's got good body kicks. She's very aggressive. She's constantly marching forward while. I think Torres in a lot of her fights that her problem is she gets backed up and she gets put on her back foot, and that's where she fights most of her fights. She did well against Andrade in her first fight. She was able to move backwards against Andrade but she was throwing heavy punches to make Andrade respect her on the feet, and she actually stole round 1 versus Andrade. All 3 judges gave that fight to Tisha Torres. Or gave that round to Tisha Torres, excuse me. So that was, definitely the most, one of the most, even though she lost that fight, that was really impressive that she was even able to win 1 round against Andrade in that fight. So this one's going to be close. If Torres is able to, get some respect from Zhang on her punches and prevent Zhang from walking her down and landing takedowns and kicking her legs, this fight could get really interesting and Tisha Torres could steal this fight on the cards. But I think the most likely way this fight plays out is Zhang mixes it up with her kicks on the feet. She gets those takedowns. She wins rounds on tops. I don't think she'll submit Torres, but I think that she will win this fight on the scorecards. Torres might steal 1 round, but I think that Zhang will win this one via decision. Next fight in the welterweight division, we have Robbie Lawler, who is 28-12, taking on Ben Askren, who is 18-0. The betting line for this one opened up Ben Askren as the minus 185 favorite, Robbie Lawler as the plus 145 underdog. Looking over at 5dimes.eu right now, we see Ben Askren at minus 280, Robbie Lawler up to plus 240. So most of the action coming in on Ben Askren in this one. He actually dropped down all the way to minus 380 at one point, but slowly but surely action creeping up on Robbie Lawler in this fight. where the line is set at right now is much more accurate than where the lowest it has been at one point. Askren at minus 380 is a little ridiculous, but I do favor Askren in this fight. Askren making his UFC debut, a long-awaited UFC debut. He's the champion in Bellator, champion in ONE FC. He was retired, and then was basically just waiting for the UFC to sign him, and then eventually the UFC actually traded Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson for Ben Askren to ONE FC, and now Askren is finally in the UFC, and he seems like he fits right in, man. He's already on the poster of the pay-per-view. He's doing well on press conferences. He's cracking jokes with Dana White. He's very comfortable where he's at. I don't think octagon jitters will be much of a problem for him. He's been wrestling since he was, I'm sure a young boy. He's been competing for 25, 30 years. I doubt this will be much of a shocker for him. I mean, he's been probably envisioning himself in the UFC for the past 10 years. So I really don't see him having any problem with octagon jitters, and I think that he will win this fight. He's one of the best wrestlers in MMA right now. He's got relentless takedowns. You can see that in pretty much all of his fights. He looks to close the distance and go for the takedown right away. His striking is pretty awful, honestly. He does not fuck around on the feet at all. He does not play cute and try to mess around with the stand-up and then go for a takedown. He pretty much just shoots on you right away, which, could be a flaw or, could be a strength in this fight, because, I would not advise for Askren to fuck around with Robbie Lawler on the feet. I think that, Robbie Lawler, by a country mile, has the better striking in this fight. He's got, great boxing, good kicks. He's just, I wouldn't say one of the best fighters in UFC history, but certainly one of the best welterweights of all time. He's the former welterweight champion. He, defended that belt against Rory MacDonald, Carlos Condit, and, just absolute wars. The guy is, just been in the UFC for forever, since, 2004 or 5. Yeah, 2004. That's fucking insane. I think he did leave at some point, went to Elite XC Strike Force, but, he's been around the game forever. And it's a winnable fight for him. Lawler could stuff the takedowns, but he's not going to stuff the takedowns for 15 minutes straight. I tell you that right now. Lawler, if he wants to win this fight, he's going to have to knock Askren out. He's going to have to stuff that takedown and make the time on the feet pay. This is something that Conor McGregor did not do against, Khabib. He was able to, that was a striker versus grappler matchup. And, Conor did not make those moments on the feet. He did not take advantage as much as he should. So in order to win this fight, Lawler is going to have to stuff the shots and then knock Askren out, because Askren is just relentless with the takedown. He's relentless with his grappling. He's been training for 5 rounds for his most recent probably his last 10 fights have been scheduled for 5 rounds. The championship rounds. Lawler is the same. He has been. I'm sure he'll have good cardio, but Lawler is coming off of an injury. He has not fought since December of 2017. He's and what it comes down to is Lawler's takedown defense in this fight. That's really what's going to make or break this one. Lawler does have good wrestling credentials. He's got good takedown defense. In general, I'd say he's best at defending shots against the cage. If you watch the Johnny Hendricks fight, the second fight, you will see Robbie Lawler stuff almost all of Hendricks' shots against the fence. Hendricks would just hang on his legs for minutes and minutes and minutes, and then the ref would either separate them or Robbie would find a way to separate. I think Hendricks did maybe take him down a few times off the cage, but most of the times where Hendricks had success with a takedown in that fight was in the middle of the cage, where Lawler could not get his back to the cage or could not cage walk if he was taken down. But if Askren gets this fight to the floor, I see it as pretty much a wrap right away. He's gonna get top pressure, and he's gonna keep top pressure. He very rarely loses position on the ground. He's got great hand fighting. He'll trap your hand and then hit you with some ground and pound. He's really become an art He's mastered the art of hand fighting, just sitting in your guard and just, trapping the hand, punching you, trapping the hand, elbowing you. He'll do that all day. It's not the most exciting fighting style, but it's effective, and he is, beaten world championship level caliber with it before. Douglas Lima, Andrei Koreshkov, a long time ago, those wins, but nonetheless, he's certainly a well-established fighter outside the octagon, and I'm sure that he will continue that dominance inside the octagon. So I'm gonna pick Ben Askren to get this one done. I think he'll take down Lawler in the first round. Lawler's gonna be so tired and so drained from defending the shot or just getting beat up on the ground that I don't think he'll carry that power he needs in the second and third round to knock out Askren. But it could certainly happen. Crazier things could have happened, but it would shock me a lot if Lawler stuffs his shots and gets the knockout on this one. But a good way to play this fight, I believe, is by that points handicap line. This time the -3.5 for Ben Askren in this one. So that means if Askren wins by 4 points or more, then you win the fight. If he finishes Lawler, you win the bet. The only time you don't win the bet is if Lawler finishes Askren or if Askren wins 29-28 or Lawler wins a decision, which I think are pretty unlikely that happen. So the pick is going to be Askren to get it done by decision. I'm going to go 30-27 too. A pretty dominant one. Dominant debut for Askren in this one. Next fight in the welterweight division, the welterweight title fight of the evening, we have the champion Tyron Woodley, 19-3-1 record, taking on Kamaru Usman, who is 14-1. The opening betting line for this one was Tyron Woodley at -145, Kamaru Usman at +105. Right now, looking over at our affiliated sportsbook 5dimes.eu, we see Woodley still at -145, Kamaru Usman at +125. So tons of two-way action coming in on this fight. We saw Woodley go all the way down to -200 earlier this week, and now we see him, back up to -145 where the line opened at. Really surprising line movement, honestly. We saw Usman at +170 just like 3 days ago, and now he's +125. So a lot of action coming in on Usman these past couple days. Interesting, maybe the sharps out there see something we don't. Maybe they found some clue that's leading them to put all this action on Usman, but honestly, I don't see it. I think the chosen one will win this fight. I think he will retain his belt. Woodley is just one of the pound for pound best in the world right now, and he's got great wrestling, offensive and defensive. He can stuff a takedown or he can hit one himself. I think he's got like 97% takedown accuracy in the UFC. I think maybe he was taken down by Rory or something like that, but his IQ is just off the charts in there. He fights so smart. Sometimes he gets labeled a boring fighter, but he's just a technician. When he fights a striker, he fights technical, and he'll hit takedowns or win that fight. He sometimes in a low output decision. His fights against Wonder Boy were a little boring. He had to fight those fights extra smart, and he had to lure Wonder Boy into a low level or a low output kickboxing match, and he won both those fights, or he drawed in one of them. But I honestly thought he won the fight that he drawed in, and he might even lost the fight that he won in. So who knows? I mean, I can't sit through that boring fight and score it for 25 minutes. So I will truly never know who won that fight. But Woodley's got excellent counterpunching. We saw that in his most recent fight against Darren Till. Darren Till threw that lead uppercut, and Woodley saw it coming a mile away and just countered right over the top with the overhand right and dropped Darren Till. So he's got power in the hands. He's got his fair share of vicious knockouts. Josh Koscheck, he knocked out the champion Robbie Lawler to win the belt. He's defended the belt 4 times. He's, like I said, he's on his way to becoming one of the best welterweights in history. He is, he won his last fight by submission as well. He's now a black belt in jiu-jitsu. He's got great submissions, and Usman is just gonna really have his hands full in this fight. He's certainly a capable fighter. I'm sure he's earned the title shot. I certainly don't like the fact that they gave it to him over Colby Covington. Colby was the interim champion. He beat RDA first. He earned the title shot. there's sound bites of of Dana saying Colby versus Tyron is next, and yeah, Colby is getting the title shot, and Colby went to the White House to meet Trump with the belt, and they still somehow don't give him the belt. I don't really understand the logic behind that, but whatever. The Usman versus Woodley is happening. I'm sure Colby is next for whoever wins this fight. But Usman, he's got some decent striking. I just don't like the way he boxes, man. His feet are very set. He's got planted feet. His legs are very long. And he's just usually when he throws strikes, his feet are planted. He's heavy on his feet, and I don't know. He's just awkward the way he throws punches. You watch the fight, if you've seen any of his fights, the way that he strikes is weird. So honestly, I see that being a problem. I think the Woodley will just be able to counter punch Usman in this one. Usman likes pushing forward. He's got good output. He's got good pressure. He likes spamming some shots on the feet and then going for that takedown. But if he tries that in this fight, I think that either he will get his takedown stuffed by Woodley with the best takedown defense in UFC history, or I think that Woodley will counterpunch his ass and possibly drop him with a punch, because Usman just his defense is just not. It's just not good. He has fought a few good strikers, Leon Edwards, Warley Alves, and RDA is a decent striker of his own right, but he really relied on wrestling in all those fights. But he's just not going to have that wrestling advantage that he usually does in his fights. Usman is really strong. I mean, the way he fights, he's strong in the clinch. He'll push you up against the cage. He'll make it hard for you to move, but. He's a pretty boring fighter. We've seen his fights against I think his three most recent fights, Emil Meek, Damian Maia, and Rafael dos Anjos. All three of those fights, pretty boring fights. I really favor Woodley in this matchup. I think the chosen one will get it done. I think he has a good chance at knocking Usman out. Maybe going for submission after he rocks him with a punch, or I think he could win this one on the scorecards too. I think that Woodley has good cardio. I think the idea that he has bad cardio is a little bit overhyped. I think it will be closer if this fight goes on the scorecards. I think Woodley could edge it out 48, 47, 49, 46. I don't think he'll dominate Usman 5 rounds to none if it goes to the cards, but. I think Woodley's best chances are, getting it done early, counter punching Usman after, Usman goes for that sloppy striking entry and testing that chin. And, we will see the chosen one retain the belt in this one. So the pick is going to be Woodley, and I'm going to go with getting it done by TKO. In the main event of the evening, we have in the light heavyweight division for the light heavyweight championship, we have John Bones Jones, who is 23-1, make that 24-0, versus Anthony Smith, who is 31-13. The opening betting line for this one was John Jones at -500, Anthony Smith at +350. Looking over at our affiliated sportsbook 5 Dimes right now, we see John Jones at -800, Anthony Smith at +550. So this line has honestly been going a little bit all over the place. It has been out for 6 weeks now. It got as low as looks like -1375 at some point, and now it sits at -800. I mean, honestly, the fight it's probably more like -1300. You don't see two big underdogs like +5, 6, 7, 800 in MMA that often. So the casual money comes in on that huge underdog, which is probably what happened in Anthony Smith. I don't really think there's too many sharps out there picking Smith to pull off one of the biggest upsets of all time. Matchup wise, John Jones needs no introduction. The greatest of all time. Some of the best fight IQ of all time. One of top 3 best fight IQ. He's got great kicks. He's got incredible timing. He can set things up like no other fighter really can. He's solid defensively. on the feet. I'd say his boxing defense is the only thing he doesn't do at an elite level. You saw him get tagged a little bit by Daniel Cormier in their most recent fight. He, uses that tall man's defense a little bit while he's, in the clinch or in those dirty boxing exchanges. But Smith is not nearly the boxer that Daniel Cormier is. Smith is, he's a tough guy. He's moved up from 185 pounds. He's looked much better since then, picking up 3 knockouts or 3 finishes in a row. He knocked out Rashad Evans. That knockout means nothing. Rashad Evans retired right after. That was, practically a dead corpse in there. He, finished Shogun Hua in the first round, which a lot of fighters have fought him recently, and Shogun has stood tall. I think Shogun's like 4-1 in his last 5 fights, with his only loss being to Anthony Smith via knockout. 90 seconds into that fight. So maybe that win is a little more impressive than we think. And then he did fight Volkan Ozdemir in his last fight, winning that fight via rear naked choke. He looked good in that fight. He didn't look invincible, but he definitely showed a little bit more of a diverse arsenal than he was used to. He showed the ability to fight with a game plan. He knew Ozdemir was a dangerous striker in the first round. He withstood that early onslaught from Ozdemir, was able to drag it into the later rounds. The third round, hit a takedown, get the back, and get the tap from Ozdemir. He recognized that Ozdemir's ground game was his weakness, and it really exploited that in that fight. But in that first round, he got hit with some shots. He definitely got tagged with a couple right hands from Ozdemir. His striking defense is, nowhere near perfect. He definitely is, hittable. He's definitely a little, like I said, his chin has looked better at 205, but have we really seen it tested? I mean, we saw it. Like I said, Ozdemir hit him with a couple nice shots, but Shogun didn't hit him with anything, and Rashad didn't hit him with anything. So I think we've really truly not seen that chin tested of Smith, but at 85, his chin was a little bit suspect. He got knocked out by Maheta Santos. That was a crazy brawl in that fight, but. Regardless, he actually got finished with a body kick in that fight too. Not even like some head strikes. So I'd say that Smith's chin is pretty solid. I don't really think that Jones has a good chance at rocking Smith with a punch in this fight. I don't think he'll do it with a head kick. I don't think he'll mess around with the striking too much at all. I think Smith's path to victory in this fight is blitzing Jones and trying to knock him out in the first round. Just starting balls to the wall and making him as uncomfortable as you can be. We've seen Jones uncomfortable in round 1 before. We've seen him, maybe rocked by Machida a little bit, possibly rocked by Vitor a little bit earlier in those fights. But, Smith nowhere near the caliber of fighters that Machida and Vitor are. It's going to be a tough task for Smith to test the chin of Jones in this one. Something a fighter really has never done. We haven't really seen John Jones hurt in the octagon almost ever. We've seen him retreating a couple times, like I said, versus Machida and Belfort, where he looked a little bit, uncomfortable, but definitely not rocked or, super hurt. Or, didn't look like he had his legs underneath him at any moment. So, the pick is obviously going to be the John Bones Jones to retain the title. I think he, I don't think he fucks around too long. I think he'll go for the takedown possibly in round 1 and, get that TKO victory, like he did in his last fight where he just gets on your back, gets in mount, and pounds you out for a finish, or possibly, cinch up a rear naked choke. Or something, I'd say rear naked is the most probable choke that happens. Maybe an arm triangle or something like that. But the pick is going to be the GOAT, John Bones Jones, to get this one done, and then hopefully, who knows what's next for him. He could fight. I hope he fights Thiago Santos next. The most deserving light heavyweight who deserves the title shot. Who knows though? He could fight Daniel Cormier at heavyweight, trying to get that double champ. He could fight Lesnar in a super fight at heavyweight, make a shitload of money, have a super easy fight versus Lesnar. The options are wide open for John Jones if he keeps himself active. We did, receive word today that Jones, still has that metabolite in his system. The test came back that the metabolite, is still in his system. I'm personally, I'm not one of the people who believes the fact that this is the same metabolite from Jones's system from August of 2017. I'm sure that there's been some re-ingestion somehow. I just don't think the scientists at USADA and the bro scientists that are running USADA have a way of proving it. That's just not speculation. Like the doping science is not proven at all. It's evolving constantly, year by year. The stuff that they're saying that it's evolving so quickly that we didn't pick up the metabolite in early 2018. The tests have gotten better in the past year to the point where they can pick out that metabolite. That's the dumbest fucking thing I've ever heard. The fact that the drug tests have gotten better from 2018, early 2018 to late 2018 to the point where they can just pick up extra metabolites from years ago. That's the dumbest fucking thing I've ever heard. I mean, the science is evolving, but the system in the method in which they analyze the results have not gotten magically better in the past year. That's such a fake narrative. There's so much bullshit going along with this John Jones, steroid situation. I'm too concerned with it, They're letting them fight. They're giving them exemptions for whatever this metabolite is. They might as well give everybody exemptions. They might as well quit this USADA bullshit. They might as well quit these, doping hearings where you get suspended for taking substances or, accidentally ingesting substances or something like that. It's all relative. It's all, a bunch of bullshit. I think they should get rid of it. I stated that multiple times in this program before, and I'm sure John Jones is charged up with whatever supplements, the special supplements he's on, and he will look like the greatest mixed martial arts ever that has ever walked the planet Earth again this Saturday night. So the pick, of course, John Jones, and looking forward to this card. It's a little bit underwhelming. The analogy I used earlier is if WrestleMania was headlined by a squash match. WrestleMania is the best pro wrestling event of the year. Usually headlined or usually stacked from top to bottom with the best matches and the best WWE wrestlers, and then the main event is usually a competitive, back and forth match between the two biggest stars. Well, Jones, the biggest star in this one, it's just unfortunate that it's not a really competitive matchup. If it was Thiago Marreta Santos in there, I think John Jones would be minus 200 or 300, and Santos might be plus 200, plus 250, something like that. That would be really exciting. But oh well. Hopefully that fight is next. And we still got ourselves a hell of a card. Usman and Woodley, razor thin matchup. The takedown defense aspect of Lawler is going to be something to watch for. Munoz Garbrandt's going to be razor thin. Stevens Zabit's going to be razor thin. And we're packed with good fights in this card. I think the dogs are going to be barking like crazy in this card. Munoz could pull off the dog win. Sarkunov, I think, will pull off the dog win. Bird could pull off the dog win. Sanchez the dog win. Cypher's the dog win. So this one's going to be good from the dogs, I believe. And that's enough about this card, though. We're going to just quickly recap the UFC that happened last week. The card that went down in Prague, Czech Republic. It was a solid fight card that happened during the day, during the morning actually started. First fight of the night, we had Damir Ismagulov defeat Joel Alvarez by decision. Damir has continued looking impressive in there, but that same problems. Damir's his killer instinct seems to be absent. He seems to be a little bit pillow-fisted. He couldn't even finish a guy like Joel Alvarez, who had really no striking about him. The guy was supposed to be some sort of jiu-jitsu submission wizard, and he barely even looked for a takedown or submission at all in this fight. So interesting. I guess Ismagulov is just he fights smart. I guess a little too smart. Diego Ferreira picking up the decision win over Rustam Khadilov. Great performance from him. Was able to stuff those takedowns or reverse the shots of Rustam Khabibov. Just incredible ground game by Diego Ferreira showed off in this fight, and then was able to win the striking exchanges and win the rounds to get the decision in that one. Really nice fight from him. Huge upset in Ismail Nardiev picking up the win over Michel Prazeres. Nardiev was able to stuff the shots of Prazeres, make him pay on the feet and win. I think he almost won 3 rounds. Let me check the scorecards in this one. Because I think he was +3, like I said, +350 in this one was Nardiev. His UFC debut was taken on Prazeres on a 8-fight win streak, and he pulls off that huge upset. Still looking for this motherfucking scores of this fight. Let's see, we have Nardiev 30-26, 30-26, 30-27. Yeah, that third round, man, I think that honestly could have been stopped in the third round. Nardiev really did 30-27 Prazeres. So one of the most impressive debuts in recent memory from Nardiev, and his future is looking bright. I think his ceiling is has not been set yet, and he could honestly be one of the top guys at in welterweight in the next couple years. Next fight, Damir Hadzovic defeating Pollo Reyes by TKO. Very smart strategic fight from him. It was able to win the first round of this fight and then finish Pollo Reyes in the second one. Jillian Robertson got the rear naked choke from Macedo. I wanted to believe that Macedo her sub defense was gonna be good enough to stuff the sub attempts of Robertson all around, but it didn't last the whole fight, unfortunately. Macedo was eventually tapped out by Robertson in the second round. Robertson is, she's a legit grappler. I kind of thought that her submissions weren't that legit, but man, she showed that she's got good grappling skills. She was able to submit Macedo, something Andrea Lee wasn't. So Robertson's submission skills are no joke. Chris Fishgold got the rear naked choke over Daniel Tamer, round 2 of that fight. Fishgold looking pretty underwhelming, sloppy in the first round. He gave up position, was actually was actually on bottom, getting hit with some ground and pound from Tamer at some point, who has no ground game. So despite Fishgold getting the win via rear naked choke in the second round, man, I still think he looked underwhelming in there. I don't think he even looked -250 or wherever his odds were at. So, Dwight Grant picking up the knockout at 4 minutes and 59 seconds of round number 1 versus Carlo Pedrozzoli, man. Just crazy knockout in this one, Dwight Grant, it looked like he was losing round 1. He looked like he was tentative like he was in his last fight. Everyone was worried about it. He's a counter puncher. That is his game, to wait to, be low output, to wait for you to strike, and then he will hit you with some his hard boxing shots, try to put you out. And, he looked tentative in his debut. He was looking tentative in this fight. But out of nowhere, he launches a punch, and it floors Carlo Pedrozzoli out of midair. And he eventually gets the knockout in this one. Just a crazy, crazy knockout in the last second of the round by Grant. And, Grant's power is no joke, man. I would like to see him, develop some more tools so he's not strictly a counterpuncher. Get his kicking game better. Constantly improve that takedown defense. And but right now he seems a little one-dimensional. But man, that shit is working out so far with him. And nice performance from him. Magomed Ankalaev defeating Kirisin Abreu, via unanimous decision. I believe that was 30-27 from him in that fight. Yeah, very impressive performance from Ankalaev in that fight. Didn't really look in trouble at all. He just broke Kirisin's Abreu's nose in the first round. Props to Abreu for toughing it out. He probably fought maybe 10 to 12 minutes with a completely broken nose in this one. Peter Yan, my man, defeating John Dodson via decision in this one. Peter Yan, just continues to impress. Got caught by Dodson at one point, was, I believe, rocked in the second round, but still won this fight, 30-27. Might even got a 30-27 in this one, on all 3 scorecards for Yan. Looked really impressive. Beat his boxing was on point. His leg kicks are on point. He had a lot of fouls in there. He was fouling fucking John Dodson a lot. Dodson was complaining left and right. It looked like, maybe a couple nut shots, a couple headbutts, maybe a little cage grab, short grab. He was doing a little bit of everything in there. But, but Peter Yan just continues to impress, man. I really think this guy's going to be a top 5 bantamweight by the end of the year. Just, up there in contention with, Munoz, with Garbrandt, with Dillashaw, with, Cejudo, with, Cruz and Marlon Moraes. All those guys. I really think he's right up there with him already. 4-0 in the UFC in the past 10 months, man. Just can't say enough good things about Peter Yan. Liz Carmouche picking up the decision over Lucy Pudilova. Really boring fight. Not much happened in it. Carmouche had some success with the takedown, but not really much. She had some control on the ground, didn't really do much damage. She won this fight based on a little bit of control. Really surprising that she won the decision. Lucia Pudilova is the only Czech fighter on the card. The crowd was going crazy for Pudilova doing nothing in this fight, but like I said, to my surprise, the judges still gave it to Carmouche. I guess the right fighter. I think she had more success, dictating where the fight took place. So I guess you could give the fight to her. Michelle Olechechuk, was TKO'd John Vellante with a nice punch to the body. Just a wicked body shot that hit Vellante right in the liver and put him down. Vellante's hard to finish, but Olechechuk did it with one punch. So props to him. He's looked good coming off his suspension. His power is there with him, and he looked like he continued to improve over that suspension. So Olechechuk is somebody to look out for in the shallow 205-pound division. Rodrigo de Lima took down, and I think he rocked Stefan Struve, and then was able to win this fight, or was able to 10-8 Stefan Struve. Just the whole round on top was just grounding and pounding. Struve was clear 10-8 round from de Lima, and then sure enough, Stefan Struve at the start of the second round hits a takedown of de Lima and gets a choke of his own, an arm triangle, winning this fight. Just an incredible comeback performance from Stefan Struve, and he retired in the octagon afterwards. A very smart decision from Stefan Struve. He's had a lot of health troubles over the past couple of years. He's had some nasty losses, so nice to see him go out on a win. Not many fighters do that, and I think he said something along those lines, is not many guys go out on a win, and I want to be one to do it. So smart play to him. And in the main event, we had Thiago Santos defeat Jan Blachowicz via knockout in the third round. Really weird fight, but two heavy hitters. They fought smart, they fought technical. I don't even really remember who won the first two rounds. I would have to go back and maybe look at the chats I sent during that fight. But interesting, right? Like I said, two heavy hitters. They didn't really throw down like we thought they would. Santos was, in the third, at the start of the third round, Blachowicz stupidly just blitzed Santos. And then got caught with a counter left hook, was dropped, and then finished with a barrage of hammer fists for the finish in this one. Marreta Santos showing off the fact that he can fight in different ways. He can brawl you. He can fight technical, or and then conserve his cardio like he did. Santos is just continuing to impress, man. The dude he's on a fucking streak, man. The dude, he lost to Branch last April. Since then has won 4 fights. Dude's super active. 6 fights in 1 year, going 5-1. He's clearly next for the title. One of my favorite fighters in the octagon. He finishes almost all of his fights. He's got, 2 decisions in the UFC out of his, 11 wins or something like that. So I hope Santos fights John Jones next, as I alluded to earlier. It was a really solid card in Prague. And that'll do it for that portion of the podcast. The only last thing we have to talk about is the news coming from the past week, which is George St. Pierre is announcing his official retirement, and a couple other fights too. We had George St. Pierre's retirement. I'll just touch on that real quick. He's been in and out of retirement for the past 5 years. He's fought once in 5 years. He came back and looked great. It was a vague retirement. He said, "Oh yeah, if the right fight and the number is right, the UFC offers the right fight, I might come back." It's like, oh great. So you're not really retiring. I honestly think that if they gave him the Khabib fight at Madison Square Garden in November at 155 or 65 or 70 or whatever, and offered him $10 million, I think George St. Pierre would take it. So it's interesting. It's interesting to see that he's retiring. Who really knows if he will stay retired or not? If he does, he's up there, top 3, top 5 pound for pound ever. Clearly the best welterweight of all time, one of the best athletes to ever step foot in the octagon, some of the best fight IQ to ever step in the octagon. And the fact that he was able to come back off that 4-year layoff, move up a weight class, and finish the champ Michael Bisping to get that double championship was just, you know, incredible. And you know, he will go down as one of the best mixed martial artists of all time. A couple of fights that were announced were Robert Whittaker versus Israel Adesanya for the interim middleweight title in lieu of Robert Whittaker's recent injury. You know, they were making that interim title fight. You know, interim title fights are bullshit, but that'll be a good fight. Israel Adesanya versus Kelvin Gastelum. They also have another interim title fight for UFC 236, which is going down in Atlanta, Georgia. Max Holloway moving up, the UFC featherweight champion, yes, you heard me, moving up to lightweight to fight for the interim lightweight title versus Dustin Poirier. You know, no fights at lightweight. So, you know, it's interesting. You know, we have killers at lightweight. You know, Gregor Gillespie, Islam Makhachev, guys who aren't even in the top 5 who are, you know, championship level caliber. You know, of course, Tony Ferguson on that, you know, 12-fight win streak. Dustin Poirier, Al Quinta, Conor McGregor. And then Max Holloway is somehow able to move up from his 45. He never even fought at 55 in his life before. And then he gets an interim title shot right away. It's real super confusing. You know, the fact that Tony Ferguson turned down this title shot, it's upsetting, because Poirier versus Ferguson would have been an insane fight. But if you were Tony Ferguson and you won the interim title already, and the UFC stripped you of that interim title because you got injured from some freak accident while you were doing media for your fight 1 week away, you know, why would you fight for that title again? You know, that shit means nothing. They're having you fight, you know, Dustin Poirier, one of the toughest guys in the division, for no fucking reason. That interim title doesn't guarantee you a title shot. You know, Khabib versus Tony could still happen despite the fact that this interim title is taking place. If Conor comes back and beats Cowboy or beats Quinta or beats whoever, the UFC could give Conor that title shot. There's no rhyme or reason for these title shots. That interim belt means nothing. It's ridiculous. You know, so the fact that Holloway could potentially come up to lightweight, beat Poirier, have one fight at lightweight and get a title shot with Khabib would be disgusting, considering the fact that Tony Ferguson is on a 12-fight win streak over like 4 or 5 years, has won the interim title, and has still not fought for that title. It's just, you know, egregious that the fact that the UFC is letting this happen. I mean, the fight itself is incredible. Holloway versus Poirier, you know, sign me up, 5 rounds, sign me up. But you know, just that stupid interim title, it just ruins it, honestly. I mean, it won't ruin it. I'm not gonna watch it. It's not like I'm not gonna enjoy the fight. It will still be a great fight, but you know, with the way they're doing Tony Ferguson dirty, with the way they're letting Holloway come up and get the immediate title shot, with the way they're leaving 145 in limbo, it's bad, man. It's bad. I know I talked about it earlier with Colby Covington, you know, how he got screwed out of his interim title shot. So, you know, it's one of the problems we have in MMA. You know, it's not going to stop us. We're still enjoying the sport, and we'll have a great weekend with the UFC 235 pay-per-view. So, and I recapped the UFC Prauge show, and I talked about a couple of the news stories throughout the week. So that is going to do it for this episode of Martian Mixed Martial Arts. I will see you guys next week before UFC Wichita. Peace.